Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on this deep dive into one of the most fascinating and mysterious stories in the world of rare coins, a story that continues to captivate collectors, historians, and investors alike. The tale of the 1958 1-cent wheat penny that reached an astonishing valuation of $3.5 million. An astronomical figure that may seem unbelievable to anyone unfamiliar with the power of numismatic rarities, but entirely justifiable ones. We uncover the layers of intrigue surrounding its creation, its errors, its flaws, its limited survival, and the numismatic frenzy that errors of this magnitude can create. So get comfortable, because we are going to walk through not only the basic history of the wheat cent but also the peculiar chain of minting events, mistakes, mechanical anomalies, striking irregularities, die varieties, and collector enthusiasm that built up over decades to make one tiny copper coin worth more than most homes, sports cars, or college funds. And as we do this, we will also dive into the psychology of collectors, the economics of scarcity, the way minting errors compound rarity, and why human fascination with flawed beauty can sometimes turn mistakes into treasures more valuable than perfection itself. So let us start by remembering that the wheat penny or wheat cent had been in production since 1909, when it was first introduced to commemorate the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and this series continued through 1958 before the reverse design was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial in 1959, meaning that the 1958 issues were in fact the last of the wheatback cents, which already gives them a special sentimental place in the timeline of American coinage. But within that closing year lurked an even more bizarre story, because among the Denver minted coins from 1958, there emerged an extremely unusual double-die obverse cent, a mistake that for many years was not even fully documented or recognized because so few examples were known to exist. And this particular coin, the one that shot up in value to $3.5 million, represents the ultimate culmination of rarity plus error plus condition plus demand, a perfect storm in the coin world. Now, what exactly is a double die? And why would such an error catapult the value of a simple 1-cent piece into the millions? Well, during the die-making process, when the hub that carries the coin's design is pressed into a blank die, sometimes the hub and the die can become misaligned between impressions, resulting in letters, numbers, or details of the portrait appearing to be doubled on the final coin struck by that die. And those such doubled dies can range from minor and barely visible to extremely bold and dramatic. In the case of the 1958 penny, the doubling was so striking that the date, motto, and lettering appeared almost as though two separate impressions were sitting side by side, unmistakably visible to the naked eye, which is the kind of anomaly that collectors go crazy for. Yet what makes the 1958 double die even more special is its mind-boggling rarity, because while some double die varieties, like the famous 1955 double die cent or the 1972 double die cent, are scarce but available to determined collectors, the 1958 double die seems to exist in only a tiny handful of examples. Some reports say 3 known, some suggest maybe a few more hidden away in private collections, but certainly not more than a single-digit population. And when you combine that with the fact that collectors of Lincoln cents are among the most passionate in the entire hobby, you have a recipe for explosive valuations. So imagine the scene: a coin that most people would glance at and dismiss as just another wheat penny suddenly revealed under close inspection to have glaring doubled features. And when grading services confirmed its authenticity, the value skyrocketed from a curiosity to a world-class numismatic prize. And here is where the economics of rarity plays its hand, because in the coin market, value is not only about the precious metal content, which for a penny is negligible, but rather about supply and demand in the collector arena. And when supply is perhaps 3 coins in existence but demand spans thousands of dedicated enthusiasts, the auction prices can and do climb into the millions. And that is exactly what happened here, with the 1958 double die cent fetching a jaw-dropping $3.5 million when sold in pristine condition, certified by top grading companies as being near mint state with minimal wear, further enhancing its appeal. Now let us pause to appreciate the combination of factors, because one element alone, such as rarity without visibility of error, might not suffice, or dramatic doubling without rarity might reduce value. But together, the almost freak accident of such a bold double die being created at Denver Mint in 1958, with so few survivors escaping into circulation and then being preserved long enough to be discovered decades later, makes for the ultimate numismatic treasure. But beyond the mechanics, let us explore the human fascination with mistakes, because in so many fields, from postage stamps to baseball cards to comic books to coins, the items that should not have existed, the anomalies, the flaws, the slips of the machine or the eye, often end up valued more highly than the intended perfect products, and this is because rarity born of error cannot be replicated by design, it is inherently unrepeatable. So while millions of 1958 pennies rolled off the presses exactly as intended, only a die alignment failure produced the fabled double die, and because mint quality control would have caught and destroyed most such anomalies, survival is minuscule. Leading us to the astonishing realization that the error coins are literally accidents that became treasures, so the 1958 double die becomes a symbol not just of coinage history but of the human tendency to revere mistakes as evidence of uniqueness. Now let us turn to the technical descriptions of what you would see if you had one of these legendary pennies in hand. The most noticeable doubling appears on the word liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," and the date itself 1958. With clear separation between the impressions. Not the kind of mechanical doubling or strike doubling that can confuse amateurs, but true hub doubling where the entire design element is doubled in full strength, giving a ghost-like second image, and this is the sort of doubling that leaves no doubt and requires no magnification, meaning that even a casual observer could notice something strange, though the rarity meant very few ever had the chance. And while many collectors are familiar with the 1955 double die cent, which has perhaps 20,000 or more known specimens and regularly sells for thousands of dollars, the 1958 doubled die is orders of magnitude rarer, making it in some sense the pinnacle of Lincoln cent collecting, so much so that experts often rank it among the top 10 rarest U.S. coins, despite it being a base metal cent with no intrinsic silver or gold, which underscores the power of collector psychology and the narrative of rarity. Now another layer of fascination is the mystery of why so few exist. For if a die was produced with this error, it should have struck thousands of coins before being retired, so where did they all go? One theory is that mint workers quickly noticed the abnormal doubling and destroyed most of the coins, accidentally allowing only a tiny handful to slip into circulation or be taken home as curiosities. Another possibility is that the die itself failed very early in the production run, creating only a few strikes before breaking or being replaced. And yet another speculation is that the Denver Mint had stricter quality controls at the time, culling unusual coins before they left the facility. Whichever the case, the extreme scarcity is undeniable, and that scarcity more than anything else explains the mind-bending price levels, because when only 3 or 4 people can possibly own something, and thousands desire it, competitive bidding escalates beyond rational levels, fueled by the prestige of ownership, the bragging rights, and the sense of holding a piece of numismatic legend. And it is worth noting that not every rare coin reaches such stratospheric prices, because the market also values historical context, symbolism, and the iconic nature of the design, and in this case, being the final year of the wheat cent design gives the 1958 issues a special resonance, a bookend in the long saga of Lincoln cents. So when an era of monumental rarity coincides with a historically transitional year, it adds even more weight. Now skeptics sometimes ask why anyone would pay millions for a penny, but the answer lies in the world of high-end collectibles, where money is not just about utility but about cultural capital, the chance to possess something almost no one else can. And this logic applies as much to rare art, luxury watches, or classic cars as it does to coins. So while a penny in your pocket buys almost nothing, a penny that tells a story of minting errors, chance survival, and collector desire becomes a symbol of wealth, status, and connoisseurship. And this is why auction houses celebrate such discoveries with elaborate marketing. Because they know that bidders are not only buying a coin but buying into a legend, the legend of a mistake so rare it transcends its humble origins. So as we continue to unpack the fascination of the 1958 wheat cent double die, let us also remember the lessons it teaches us about human value systems, about how we sometimes prize and speaking of staggering values and the stories behind them, let us move smoothly into another legend of the Lincoln cent series, one that surpasses even the 1958 D double die in terms of headline value. Because here we are talking about the 1944 1-cent wheat penny that has been documented at astonishing auction prices reaching up to $5 million. And this coin's story is even more layered with intrigue because it was born not simply from hub, doubling, or die alignment errors, but from an extraordinary moment in minting history when the composition of the Lincoln cent itself was in transition due to World War II, a time when America was rationing copper for the war effort, and the cent's metallic formula changed drastically in 1943, giving rise to both famous steel cents and even rarer transitional errors. So to understand why the 1944 1 cent is so prized, we need to step back into the context of the early 1940s, when the United States Mint found itself under pressure to conserve copper, a critical material for shell casings, ammunition, and wartime machinery, and thus in 1943 the familiar bronze cent made of copper and tin was replaced with a zinc-coated steel version, producing a silvery penny that looked more like a dime than a cent. But these steel cents corroded easily, caused problems in vending machines, and confused the public. So in 1944 the mint reverted to the bronze alloy, this time using recycled shell casings from the war effort to create the copper-based cents. However, during this transition, a few steel planchets left over from 1943 somehow found their way into the presses in 1944, resulting in the ultra-rare 1944 steel cents, of which only a tiny handful exist. But there is another twist. Because just as 1943 should not have produced bronze cents yet did due to leftover blanks, so 1944 should not have produced steel cents but did because of the same error in reverse, and these transitional anomalies are what fuel the multi-million-dollar valuations, since they represent both mistakes and rare historical artifacts of the wartime economy. Now when we talk about the $5,001,944 wheat penny, we are usually referring to one of these wrong planchet transitional error coins, most famously the 1944 steel cent or its equally elusive cousin struck on other unintended planchets. And these coins are considered the holy grail of Lincoln cent collectors, because they bridge the gap between two distinct years of composition, capturing a literal mistake of history in metal, and because only a few are known. Some reports suggest fewer than 30 confirmed specimens across all mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, their rarity rivals that of any classic American numismatic treasure, and when one appears at auction, the frenzy is immediate, with wealthy collectors vying for ownership, pushing prices into the millions, and the most pristine examples, certified in mint state condition, have reached the $5 million level, cementing the 1944 wheat cent as a true legend. Now what makes these coins even more fascinating is the detective story behind them, because the mint's processes were supposed to prevent such mistakes, with old planchets cleared out before new alloys were introduced. Yet the sheer volume of wartime production and the human element of oversight meant that stray planchets could linger in the machinery, slipping unnoticed into the presses, and thus in 1944, a few steel blanks from the previous year were mistakenly struck with the new 1944 dies, creating coins that technically should not exist. And whenever something should not exist but does, collectors immediately sense the aura of rarity, because no planned mintage figures can explain them, and no deliberate design can replicate them. They are once-in-a-lifetime accidents frozen in copper and steel, now beyond their rarity. What amplifies the value of the 1944 steel cent is its symbolism, because it ties directly into the story of America during World War II, when even pennies were drafted into the war effort, when copper became ammunition, and when millions of ordinary citizens encountered unusual steel cents in their change. So a surviving 1944 steel cent is not only an error but also a tangible piece of wartime history, a reminder of sacrifice, resource allocation, and the adaptability of the mint under pressure. And that dual identity, error plus history, magnifies its appeal. Now let us describe what you would actually see if you held a 1944 steel cent in your hand. Visually, it resembles the 1943 steel cent in its silvery color, but with the date 1944 boldly struck on the obverse. instantly raising eyebrows because everyone knows 1944 cents should be bronze, and numismatists test these coins with magnets, since steel cents are magnetic while bronze ones are not, confirming their anomaly at once, and grading services such as PCGS and NGC carefully authenticate them to distinguish true transitional errors from fakes, which are common given the immense value at stake, but once authenticated, the shock value of seeing 1944 on a steel cent is enough to electrify even seasoned collectors, because you know you are looking at one of perhaps a few dozen known in the world, and when such a coin appears in high-grade mint state, without significant wear, it is almost priceless. Which explains the record-breaking $5 million valuation. Now let us explore why people are willing to pay such sums, because beyond rarity, beyond history, there is a deep human fascination with the what if, and the should not have been. And the 1944 steel cent embodies that fascination perfectly. It is a coin that should not exist yet does, a relic of chaos within order, an accident within a system designed for precision, and because of that, owning one is like owning a secret chapter of history, a conversation piece that connects you to the war, the mint, and the quirks of human oversight, all crystallized in a tiny 1-cent piece. And the psychology of collectors tells us that these factors, rarity, story, symbolism, condition, stack together to drive valuations far beyond the intrinsic worth of the metal. So while a 1944 steel cents material is worth only a fraction of a cent, its narrative value, historical context, and scarcity multiply into millions. And what is especially remarkable is that examples continue to surface from unexpected places. Sometimes found by ordinary people in old jars of change, sometimes sitting unnoticed for decades until someone realizes their uniqueness, and each discovery reignites the frenzy. Because unlike designed rarities, such as commemoratives or limited editions, transitional errors cannot be planned, they are pure accidents of history, and that gives them an authenticity that money cannot fake. Now when compared to the 1958 D-double die, which commanded $3.5 million, the 1944 steel cents $5 million valuation is both logical and poetic, because while the double die is rare for its striking error, the 1944 steel cent is rare for its very existence, a coin from a year that by definition should not contain that composition, and thus it represents not only numismatic rarity but also a paradox, and paradoxes are priceless in the world of collectibles. So whenever you hear the staggering phrase, a 1944 penny worth $5 million, know that it is not hype but grounded in the perfect storm of scarcity, historical resonance, visual anomaly, and collector passion, and it reminds us once again that in the world of coins, mistakes often outshine perfection, and that sometimes the smallest objects tell the biggest stories. And to add just a little more depth to this incredible story of the 1944 1-cent wheat penny that reached the remarkable $5 million mark, it is important to understand how the very idea of error coins bridges two worlds: the technical world of minting where precision is supposed to rule, and the human world of collecting where rarity and uniqueness ignite imagination. Because the 1944 steel cent is not just an accident, it is a symbol of how even the most carefully controlled systems can produce anomalies that defy expectation, and this in turn makes us think about how history often leaves behind strange survivors, little artifacts that slip through the cracks and later become treasured windows into the past. And when such artifacts are coins, objects that were never meant to be preserved but instead to circulate through millions of hands, their survival feels even more miraculous, which only strengthens their allure. So the $5 million price tag is not only a measure of money but a reflection of the awe these coins inspire. And when collectors speak of dream finds, the 1944 steel cent is always near the top of the list, not just for its monetary reward but for the honor of holding something so elusive and meaningful. And this is why the legacy of the 1944 wheat penny will continue to grow, reminding us that every handful of change carries the possibility of discovery. Every old box of coins in an attic might hide a secret, and that sometimes the smallest pieces of metal can tell us the grandest stories about history, chance, and the extraordinary value of the rare and unexpected.